in kind of long-term social movements for change. And each lecture we've invited like 3 people. So it was an activist, a researcher, and a designer. And we had our first lecture on the land back movement, the second one on disability justice, and our third one was on Tuesday, which was on abolition. And these student workshops are meant to kind of engage the content in more of like a casual way and just have us like kind of discuss and do like fun activities with them. And so tonight we'll be having Faith and Paige perform, which Simone will introduce. And then after they perform, we're gonna go into little breakout rooms and do a kind of group activity, which maybe I'll keep a surprise until after the performances. And yeah, so Simone could go ahead and introduce.
Yeah, so we have Faith Paré and Paige Keleher, who are here from their collective, their poetry collective called VOLTA Collective Montreal, which I think they will both be introducing. And so Faith is a poet and performer of Afro-Guyanese and Quebecois ancestries. Her writing is forthcoming in Arc and Carnation, and has previously appeared in Guts, Asa, and Shameless magazine. Faith is a proud alum of Our Bodies, Our Stories, a creative collective for artists who are queer and trans, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, mentored by Kamala Mackerel. And she recently completed the Quebec Writers Federation's 2020 Mayruth Sarsfield mentorship for underrepresented writers under the guidance of Dr. Jillian Cizé. I'm sorry if I
you got it.
Right.
You're close. Yeah.
Okay, Cizé. She is studying her honors BA in English and creative writing, and you can find her writing at faithparé.com. And so Paige is a mixed race Black girl living in Montreal, and she is 1/3 of the trio that founded VOLTA, which is an anti-carceral, anti-institutional artist collective dedicated to Black art and Black futures. She's trying to become the color pink, likes crop tops, and loves grapefruit. And okay, so apparently this is of key importance. She is the person that you would want to be curating your road trip playlists. And also the abolition playlist that VOLTA has, I have to say, is very, very good. So
yeah. It's my magnum opus or whatever.
Do both of you want to actually introduce the collective that you're a part of?
Yeah, we decided to like kind of split the time. So I'm gonna do my poems, talk a little bit about VOLTA, and then Paige is gonna do her poems, talk a little bit about VOLTA. And we're about, have about 7 minutes each, to kind of make the time work. So I'll make sure I'm keeping an eye on the clock as well. Thank you so much for your introductions and for having us. My name is Faith, as Simone said. I'm joined by my friend and co-conspirator Paige. We're two poets, part of VOLTA Collective. You might also see one of the attendees, Meredith Marty Dugas, who's our third member as well. And as Simone said, oh yeah? And we're an Art Meets Anti-Carceral collaborative group based in Jojage, known as Montreal as well. And we're just really thrilled by the work that Tree Lands Global Stories is doing to kind of resist the institution when locked into the institution. It's really like defined a lot of the work that we've emerged from and we've wrangled with, and we're continuing to do. So we're really excited to join you virtually in solidarity and also kind of link up with other people thinking about abolition, anti-carcerality, and futures outside of punishment, across the nation. It's really important and critical. So thank you for having us. So yeah, we're going to dive into some of our poetry. I wish we could all be in the same room as you, but I think the virtual thing has been really cool in order to connect and share. And I'll also talk a little bit about VOLTA and its origins, the major projects that we did to kind of kick off our collective this summer. Some of us did not die, and thinking about why art when approaching and advocating for abolition. And as Simone had kind of talked about, VOLTA was established by us, where I'm a current creative writing student, Paige and Meredith are graduates now, and we began thinking about VOLTA as an idea in the wake of sexual misconduct and power imbalance within our department. And we really think about literary arts as being a vehicle and a tool and conversation with transformative justice and with anti-carceral action, that poetry, guerrilla publishing, and performance is not secondary to organizing, but is actually a critical component in thinking about imagination as being integral to abolitionist practice. Volta in Italian means turn, and it also connotes the shift, transformation, or overturning of a previous stream of thought or emotion in a sonnet. And that's the principle that kind of guides our poetics and our organizing as well. So I'm going to kick off with my first poem. I do want to warn, you might hear a little dog in the background that my roommate will frantically grab up and run into the other room with. So bear with me. This poem is called Testimony. I have no words, officer. Blame my tongue, who stole each one in its scamper for escape when he begged me, when your men with the gavel bang voices hounded me. Yes, I remember bodies, their blur, her temper already unraveling from bad wages and sore feet, breakfast dishes he'd been told to wash still stacked in the sink, shouts charging for him before she even reached his room, how I peered from the staircase a second too late, officer. I just heard a hand thrash through air, breathlessness, the teacup clatter of her bones, then the swell of quiet. My tongue tied and tried unraveling. The crater left behind a scream that couldn't escape me. A sudden smack of reds and blues, the law pounding on the door. Bodies blurred the room, swarmed, haulers, handcuffs unraveling the black boy to his knees. They wanted to know what I had seen. She said, remember how his fist sheathed into the red of her mouth. He said, tell them it wasn't him. Of our lifelong flee from the thrash of her muleta tongue. They said, who hurt who? I said, when? At what point? They didn't hear, just hissed like their radios. Tell us, can't you remember? Who swung? Who's wrong? You saw, but I blinked. I blinked. Truth lost within that dark bridge between. My bones knew who, my eyes did not, and he shattered. A dish against drywall. Don't you see, officer? There's a fist where his heart used to be. A second is still charging through the house of me. Thank you. So that's number one. And to talk a little bit about Volta, Paige, Meredith, and I met as classmates and co-organizers. We were working in, thank you for your little applause emojis. We were working in grassroots anti-sexual violence work and student advocacy, and particularly were inspired to do so after accusations of misconduct had in the creative writing department had finally hit the airwaves, even though there had been plenty of complaints and organizing for pretty much decades previously. And we found that we were extremely burnt out with so-called legitimate and institutional friendly methods of change that were offered to us. So student government, panels, task forces, and those are vehicles that can really make immense change, but often we found in trying to deal with the administration that they use these tactics to kind of stifle more radical approaches to understanding how the university has perpetuated, and also creative writing spaces, whether they're in the university or not, perpetuates racism, anti-Blackness, anti-indigeneity, classism, cissexism, homophobia, misogyny, misogynoir, ableism, and how the university is part of the settler colonial project of Canada, and how Canadian literature is tied to that. So our organizing had to be in tandem with poetic practice. And we were really interested, after studying under Dr. Natalie Batcherville in the Women's Studies Department at Concordia, thinking about how we found that the core of our issue was reform, really, and the issues around reform, which is really what abolitionists are interested in critiquing. And we wanted to think about how punishment and carcerality dictates learning in creative spaces, dictates learning in creative spaces, creates power imbalances, and doesn't actually resolve the harm that it creates, whether it be sexual violence, whether it be anti-Blackness, whether it be supporting and advocating for, police and criminal justice, etc. So through thinkers like Angela Davis, Leah Lakshmi, Piepsna Samrasina, and others. We want to create VOLTA in order to address some of these issues and actually think about how community can use art to think about abolition. So before I hand it over to Paige, I'm going to do my very last, very short poem, Gethsemane, and this is for our Black Street revolutionaries, unnamed, missing, and forgotten in the wake of summer 2020. Before we were cloaked in too late, before the trees split open with torches, fear scorching its name across our faces, before our friends shattered onto pavement with the timber of a city falling, before we cut off the ears of those who laughed over our poetry, before we cut off our own and cupped the folded dead things in our hands, before morning, before night, before another unsettled morning, before we donned the blue of sirens, before all we had to chew on was rubble, before it ended exactly as they said it would, and our foreheads were reacquainted with the dirt. We ate together. We started there. It always starts there. We always grew something in this stranger's soil. We always found something to share. We never needed names. We cursed, we spat, we bared our teeth. We came back for each other regardless. We laughed knowing there would be a time we'd forget its sound. Its airiness filled our bellies. We invented songs they never sang to us as children. We once were children, children who had nothing left to see except a way out. We lived when they refused to call it that. We still sweated blood, but someone was there with the pad of a thumb to wipe it away. Summer 2020. Paige, if you want to take it away.
Yes. First of all, I agree with everything Faith has said so far. I guess in thinking about like what my journey with abolition has been, I don't have anything as as eloquent to say as Faith, but I think my experience is very much rooted in the fact that my mother was a Black woman, my mother, and a cop, and passed away from cancer. So, you know, in deconstructing sort of like the relationship that maybe I would have had with my mother, the conversations we would have had about abolition, where like her relationship with the carceral system would have evolved. That's sort of like where my poetry is coming from. I think it's a little bit less academic in that sense. So I hope you'll forgive that. But if I was going to cite something for this poem, it would be Closer to Find by the Indigo Girls. So shout out if you know that song. Okay. So also none of my poems really have titles because I find them kind of annoying. Sorry. Okay. Oh yes, that God, the great dean of students in the sky. You need at least 3 academic sources to appease this review board of life, of divinity, of wisdom. And when you're ready to submit, you must disclose everything that you have. Sorry to tell you, your trauma exists here. And maybe you shouldn't have had so much faith in the institution because it wants you to educate, to immortalize, to hand you a legacy, to drop it off at my office, but not to keep you alive. Then I think I have also been thinking about the ways that we sort of try to get out of systems of abolition. I think a lot of people use religion, which is also interesting in the sense that a lot of religious practices are what created the prison industrial complex as we know it now. And I'm sort of working on a chapbook that talks about the intersection between devotion, spirituality, and religion, and where that fits in with abolition. But the first step is like deconstructing biblical figures that, anyways, I feel like I'm rambling a little bit, so I'm just gonna keep going. So I'm deconstructing religious figures. One of my favorites is Lilith. I'm always thinking about that lady. Lilith's caramel skin honors her ancestors. Her hair is pastel purple, and the pears in her garden are the juiciest. When she whispers sin to me, annotates her own biography, I'm sure, so sure that I love her. She looks good in a ball gown. She looks good in a strategically placed leaf. She looks good to me every day of the week. Saturday night she glows, Sunday she rests under my weighted blanket with me. Here's another poem about God, I guess, because I just don't understand him. And I wonder how she feels about constantly being misgendered. And we should riot and read lots of books because they're specific to our time and we don't know who will outlive who, or how many lives we get, or how many arms the God that we'll believe in our next life will have. In my next life, I want to be girlfriends with Lilith, and we can fight for things, but never about things, because we're too busy changing lives. And finally, when the moon wanes exactly where I want it to, I will yell, "Oh my God," repeatedly at the sky, and think what a blessing and accident it is to be alive. And then one final poem. I think the important thing in learning about abolition is that it's constantly a process and we're always learning. And I welcome anyone of any knowledge level on abolition to DM me. My Instagram is 90210.mom. We can talk about it. I love having these conversations. And so this is for anyone who's a little frightened to take the abolition journey. Whoever finds God in the street in the dead of night can have a seat at my table. And whoever finds God at the weathered hands of their parents or never getting to be authentic can eat here to their heart's content. God dips in between the silences of the metronome, ticks to the beat of broken hearts, pulls thread through the tender flesh of their fragility to mend them. If we're certain that God can salvage us, then we're invincible, right? Whoever finds God in the gore can sit with me and feast. Thanks. Okay. Thank you. I see all your reactions. I appreciate them. Thanks.
That's pretty much us. I think the last thing I'll say for VOLTA is that you can follow us. I'm just dropping our Instagram in the bio or in the chat. We are currently at work on developing kind of what our mandate's going to be moving forward after our big show in the summer. We're going to be thinking about potentially doing a panel at some point, but this is far into the future, definitely the new year. So if you want to keep up with us, please feel free to follow on Instagram or on Facebook. There's also a fantastic panel with Meredith and Paige coming up very soon. That's going to be organized by ERA Magazine, which is a feminist art magazine run out of Concordia. They're going to be having Meredith and Paige talking about VOLTA. There's also going to be members from T-Base, which is an amazing collective in Toronto, as well as Fruition, which is another incredible cutie BIPOC collective based in Montreal. And they're going to be talking about art, activism, and particularly feminist presence in that. So yeah, feel free to keep up with us. And thanks for having us. I'm really excited to hear what kind of poetry you guys come up with tonight. So.
I will also just add that panel is from 5:30 to 7, I think. And I will also plug Ending Violence class, which is, I'm taking Natalie Batcherville's class on abolition, and it's amazing. And a big part of the class is memes. So there are memes on that page. And I encourage you to follow that one as well.
Thanks so much, Faith and Paige. That was super awesome. and really beautiful poems. I think I'm gonna hand it to either Jade or Miara to introduce the workshop.
Sure, I can explain. So basically we have a mural board, which I think we shared in the chat. If not, we'll do it in a minute. But essentially the goal tonight is for us to produce our own poetry as well. And what we've decided to do for the format is that we're going to do a form of reductive poetry. So basically we take an existing text, and we've chosen texts which are known for their racism regarding architecture and the built environment. And then we are going to black out some of the words in that text to produce an abolitionist text. So this is going to be a fun kind of inverted form of poetry for us to do. And we'll be going into breakout rooms for that.
Okay, I guess I just want to make sure everyone got the link or if it's working. If not, that's okay. Should I just randomly assign people to a breakout room? Okay, I'm gonna do that right now.
But we should have one host for each breakout room.
Yes. Okay, actually, before we do that, I just wanted to share my screen, and I'm gonna tell you the readings we have here, and walk you through a little bit about why we chose them. Okay, so the two that we've sort of selected just a couple of pages from are Corb, who we all know, and we don't all love. I think everyone here at this point knows Le Corbusier and has taught Corb in their class. And I sort of chose this one because in lots of exhibits about Corb, or the way in which we learn about Corb, we don't learn about his connections to fascism or Nazism. And so, is that a term? I think what I found just sort of one of his texts that lots of people refer to, especially like if you've ever used the term regulating lines. And I think what's interesting here is this text, there's obviously, he has an understanding of geometry in which I think is problematic. I think if you read these texts, it becomes really clear why we chose them. The other one is Adolf Loos. And if you've read Ornament and Crime, you know it is sort of much more blatantly racist and sexist and problematic in so many ways. And I think sometimes we're taught these texts in class and not necessarily, and told to think of them outside of their context, or told to sort of like appreciate the architectural lessons as if they're neutral. So what you're gonna do, I guess, is make your own form of blackout poetry. This is an example that I did that's very bad, so don't read it, but that's how it's gonna look. And you just kind of can select an image, and then you can, take one of these blackout lines and make your own poem within your breakout room. Yeah, okay. Let me